Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wondered why some wrongs just feel worse than others, even when the outcome is the same? Today we're diving into a fascinating study about how we react to harms done to us, and whether it matters if someone actively hurts us or just lets something bad happen. This paper explores something called the omission bias. Basically, most of the time, people tend to judge someone more harshly if they actively do something wrong. A commission compared to if they fail to do something right. An omission. Think about it. Would you be more upset if your friend actively lied to you or if they just forgot to tell you something important that also led to you being misled? Most people feel that the active lie, the commission, feels worse. But does this hold true when you're the one who is hurt? And how does this affect whether we forgive? This research tackled those questions. The researchers wanted to know if victims of wrongdoing, just like outside observers, show this omission bias. They also wanted to see if this bias affects how likely we are to forgive someone and how effective apologies are. They conducted 4 studies using different methods, like made-up scenarios and studies where people recalled real, life events. Imagine your partner doesn't tell you about a past relationship. That is an omission. Now imagine they actively lie about it. Both leave you in the dark, but the lie might sting a lot more. The central question here is whether victims, like us, are more forgiving of omissions, or if we also blame and judge those who actively commit harm more severely. Past research has shown that outsiders do this omission bias thing, but we don't know if victims do too. This is a big gap because victims are the ones deciding about forgiveness. Plus, the researchers wondered if apologies work the same way for both types of offenses. So, what is this omission bias? Lots of studies show that people tend to favor avoiding harm through inaction over taking action that might prevent harm, but involves doing something. It is like the classic trolley problem where many people would rather let 5 people die by not diverting the trolley than actively push a lever to kill 1 person to save the 5. In personal relationships, this bias means we often see active wrongdoing as more intentional, more responsible, and more immoral than failing to act. One classic example from the paper is about 2 tennis players. The night before a match, one player suggests a dish to the other that they know contains an ingredient the other is allergic to. The other player gets sick and loses the match. That is a commission actively suggesting the harmful dish. Now, what if the player just stays silent when the other player unknowingly orders the dish with the allergen? That is an omission. Even though the outcome is the same, the player gets sick and loses the match. Researchers found that people judge the player who suggested the dish more harshly. They were seen as more responsible, more intentional, and more immoral. The reason behind this bias is thought to be the causal relevance hypothesis. This suggests we see an actor's actions as more directly causing the bad outcome than their inactions. Because commissions are seen as more causally linked to the harm, we tend to attribute more blame and see more intent behind them. The researchers in this study predicted that victims would also show this bias, seeing commissions as worse than omissions. That was their first big hypothesis. When something bad happens, victims try to make sense of it. This is a crucial part of deciding whether to forgive. 2 of the biggest things victims look at are how much blame the other person deserves, and whether they meant to cause harm. If you feel someone is really responsible or that they intentionally tried to hurt you, you are generally less likely to forgive them. The study hypothesized that because commissions often involve higher perceived responsibility and intent, they would lead to less forgiveness. This leads to hypothesis 2. People would forgive less for commissions than omissions, and hypothesis 3. That these perceptions of responsibility and intent would explain why forgiveness is lower for commissions. The researchers also looked at morality judgments. If someone acts intentionally to cause harm, we often judge their behavior and their character as more immoral. This could be another reason why we're less forgiving of commissions. So, they predicted that commissions would lead to judgments of higher immorality, which would then lead to less forgiveness. That was hypothesis 4. Now, what about apologies? Apologies are powerful tools for mending relationships. They can signal remorse and a commitment to doing better. But would an apology work the same for an active harm versus a failure to act? The researchers thought it might not. On one hand, you might want a stronger apology for a more deliberate act. On the other hand, if an intentional harm is perceived, an apology might even backfire, seeming insincere. They hypothesized that apologies might be less effective for commissions because of the higher perceived intent. This was hypothesis 5. Finally, they wanted to see if victims and people just observing the situation reacted the same way. Would this omission bias be even stronger for the person who was directly harmed? They thought that actually both victims and observers might process the offense similarly because observers often empathize with the victim, narrowing the gap. In study 1, they created a hypothetical scenario. Participants imagined a coworker making them late for a meeting. In one version, the coworker actively confirmed the wrong meeting time, leading to lateness commission. In the other, the coworker said nothing when they knew the correct time, omission. Participants rated their feelings and how much they'd forgive. Later, they imagined the coworker either apologizing or not apologizing and then rated forgiveness again. They got 376 participants to complete this study. The core of the study was that little story: you and your coworker are up for a review. The boss schedules a meeting for 9:15 a.m. and you are leading it. The afternoon before, you tell your coworker, "See you at 9:30. In the commission, the coworker replies, "Yep, see you at 9:30, knowing it is actually 9:15. In the omission, the coworker just says nothing, again, knowing it is 9:15. Before anything else happened, they measured how forgiving people felt. Then they asked about how intentional the coworker's actions were, how responsible they were, and how immoral their behavior was. They also specifically asked about how immoral the coworker's behavior and character seemed. After this initial assessment, participants were randomly assigned to imagine their coworker either offering a sincere apology or saying nothing at all. Then, they measured forgiveness again to see if the apology made a difference. The results showed that, across the board, people saw the coworker who actively confirmed the wrong time as more responsible and their behavior as more intentional. This aligns with the omission bias. However, surprisingly, there was no direct difference in forgiveness before the apology. It seems the type of offense didn't immediately make people less forgiving in this specific scenario. When they looked at the effect of apologies, they found something interesting. Apologizing definitely led to more forgiveness than not apologizing. And this was true for both commission and omission offenses. The apology didn't seem to be more or less effective depending on whether it was an act of harm or a failure to act. This went against their initial hypothesis that apologies might be less effective for commissions. Digging deeper, the study found that the reasons why commissions were judged more harshly did lead to less forgiveness. People saw the commissions as more intentional and more responsible, and these perceptions then led to lower forgiveness. Importantly, this effect was often serially mediated through judgments of immorality. So, the commission made people see the coworker as more responsible and intentional. This made them see the behavior as more immoral. And that led to less forgiveness. This supported their mediation hypotheses. In study 1, the researchers found that while the type of offense didn't directly decrease forgiveness, it did influence how people perceived the transgressor's responsibility and intent. These perceptions, in turn, predicted lower forgiveness, often through judgments of immorality. They also found that apologies were beneficial for both types of offenses, which was a key finding. To build on this, study 2 used recalled real-life transgressions. Participants thought about a time someone did something bad to them, either an action commission or a failure to act omission, and then imagined a response from the offender. This study was powerful because it used actual experiences. Participants recalled events where someone either actively did something hurtful or failed to do something they should have. And the results were consistent. People rated commissions as more severe, more responsible, more intentional, and more immoral than omissions. Crucially, they also reported lower initial forgiveness for commissions. Again, apologies helped increase forgiveness for both types of offenses. And the benefit of apologizing was similar whether the offense was a commission or an omission. The mediation models also held up. Commissions led to lower forgiveness through perceptions of responsibility, intent, and immorality, just like in Study 1. Study 2 provided stronger evidence that victims' perceptions of commissions versus omissions matter for forgiveness. And this path often goes through judgments of responsibility, intent, and immorality. The fact that apologies were equally effective also remained true. Study 3 used hypothetical scenarios, but this time they used two different types of scenarios to make the commission versus omission distinction clearer and more robust, building on work from previous omission bias research. They also refined their measure of intent to focus on the intention to cause harm. One scenario involved an eyewitness to a car accident who either lied to protect a friend, commission, or stayed silent, omission. Even in these more deliberate scenarios, the omission bias showed up. Again, commissions were perceived as more intentional, responsible, and immoral, and victim participants reported lower forgiveness for them. And guess what? Apologies boosted forgiveness equally for both commissions and omissions. The mediation pathways through responsibility, intent, and immorality on forgiveness were replicated. Study 3 further solidified the idea that commissions, even when thoughtfully designed, are perceived more negatively by victims, leading to lower forgiveness. And again, apologies proved to be a reliable tool for increasing forgiveness, regardless of the offense type. The final study was key. It directly compared victims and third-party observers using the eyewitness scenario from Study 3. The goal was to see if the omission bias and the effects of apologies were the same for someone directly harmed versus someone just watching. Participants were either asked to imagine themselves as the victim of the car accident or as a neutral observer watching it unfold and then hearing the eyewitness's statement. The results showed striking similarities. Both victims and third-party observers perceived commissions as more responsible, intentional, and immoral than omissions. Importantly, this omission bias effect on perceptions and on forgiveness was not moderated by perspective. That means both groups were equally susceptible to judging commissions more harshly. And when it came to apologies, the pattern held across both victims and third-party observers. Apologies increased forgiveness for both commissions and omissions, and there was no difference in how effective the apology was depending on the offense type or the observer's role. This directly contradicted their initial hypothesis that apologies might be less effective for commissions, especially for third-party observers who might be more sensitive to perceived insincerity. So, what is the big takeaway from these 4 studies? The researchers found consistent evidence that victims do show an omission bias. They perceive active wrongdoings or commissions as more blameworthy and intentionally harmful than failures to act or omissions. These perceptions in turn predict lower forgiveness. This effect often happens through judgments of immorality. The researchers really emphasize how commissions, even with equivalent outcomes to omissions, tend to lead to less forgiveness because of how we perceive the transgressor's role and intent. It might be harder to forgive someone who actively does something bad compared to someone who just fails to prevent harm. A really important finding, and one that offers practical advice, is that apologies seem to be robustly effective. Regardless of whether the offense was a commission or an omission, an apology consistently led to greater forgiveness. This is a powerful message for anyone looking to repair relationships, even though commissions are perceived more negatively. A sincere apology can still help bridge the gap. Now, the researchers were also good at pointing out limitations. Because their process model data was correlational, they can't say for sure that responsibility and intent cause immorality and then cause less forgiveness. There might be other ways these things are connected. Also, using hypothetical scenarios means people have perfect information about what the transgressor knew, which isn't always true in real life. And finally, they used hypothetical victims, which might not capture the full emotional intensity of being truly offended. In conclusion, this research shows that the way a transgression is committed actively or by inaction matters a lot in how we perceive it and how likely we are to forgive. Commissions tend to provoke stronger negative judgments and less forgiveness, mediated by our perceptions of responsibility, intent, and morality. However, the consistent power of apologies across both types of offenses offers a clear path toward reconciliation. It suggests that while the initial offense might be harder to overlook when it is a commission, a good apology can, and often does, pave the way for forgiveness. So what does this mean for us? Next time you are hurt by someone, think about whether it was an action or inaction that caused the harm. And if you are the one who needs to apologize, remember that a sincere apology seems to be a universal key to healing, no matter the nature of the offense. What are your thoughts on the omission bias and forgiveness? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this dive into psychology interesting, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more brain-boosting content. Until next time, stay curious.